The Constitution of India, Part 4. In this part, we'll see Article 301 to 395 and Parts 8 to Part 22. Now, Part 8. Trade, commerce, and intercourse within the territory of India. Article 301, freedom of trade, commerce, and intercourse. 302, power of Parliament to impose restriction on trade, commerce, and intercourse. 303, restrictions on the legislative power of the Union and of the states with regard to trade and commerce. 304, restriction on trade, commerce, and intercourse among states. 305, saving of existing law and laws providing for state monopolies. Article 306 is now omitted, which was related to power of certain state in Part B of the first schedule to impose a restriction on trade and commerce is now omitted. Article 307, appointment of authority for carrying out the purposes of Article 301 to 304. Now next part, which is related to services under the Union and the state. That is Part 14. Chapter 1, services. Article 308, interpretation. 309, recruitment and condition of service of persons serving the Union or a state. 310, tenure of office of persons serving the Union or a state. 311, dismissal, removal, or reduction in the rank of persons employed in civil capacities under the Union or a state. 312, All India services. 312A, power of Parliament to vary or revoke conditions of services of officers of certain services. Article 313, transitional provisions. Article 314 now omitted, which was related to provisions for protection of existing officers of certain services, is now omitted. Chapter 2, Public Service Commissions. Article 315, Public Service Commissions for the Union and for the states. 316, appointment and terms of office of members. 317, removal and the suspension of a member of a Public Service Commission. 318, power to make regulations as to conditions of service of members and staff of the Commission. 319, prohibition as to the holding of the offices by members of Commission on ceasing to be such members. I am repeating it again. Article 319, prohibition as to the holding of the offices by members of Commission on ceasing to be such members. Article 320, functions of Public Service Commissions. 321, power to extend functions of Public Service Commissions. 322, expenses of Public Service Commissions. 323, reports of Public Service Commissions. Part 14A, tribunals. Article 323A, administrative tribunals. Article 323B, tribunals for other matters. Then Part 15, elections. Article 324, superintendence, direction and control of elections to be vested in an election commission. 325, no person to be ineligible for inclusion in or to claim to be included in a special electoral roll on ground of religion, race, caste, or sex. 326, elections to the House of People and to the legislative assemblies of the state to be on the basis of adult suffrage. Article 327, power of Parliament to make provisions with respect to elections to legislatures. Article 328, power of legislature of the state, of a state to make provisions with respect to elections to such legislature. Article 329, bar to interference by courts in electoral matters. Article 329A, now omitted, which was related to special provisions as to elections to the Parliament in case of Prime Minister and Speaker. Now this article was omitted. Part 16, special provisions relating to certain classes. Article 330, reservations of seats for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in the House of People. 330A, reservations of seats for women in the House of People. 331, representation of the Anglo-Indian community in the House of the People. 332, reservation of seats for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in the legislative assemblies of the states. 332A, reservations of the seats for women in legislative assemblies of the states. 333, representation of the Anglo-Indian community in the legislative assemblies of the states. 334, reservations of seats and special representations to cease after certain period. 334A, reservation of seats for women take effect. 335, claims of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes to services and post. Article 336, special provision for Anglo-Indian community in certain services. 337, special provisions with respect to educational grants for the benefit of Anglo-Indian communities. 338, National Commission for Scheduled Caste. 338A, National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. 338B, National Commission for Backward Classes. 339, control of union over the administration of scheduled areas and welfare of scheduled tribes. 340, appointment of commission to investigate the conditions of backward classes. Article 341, scheduled castes. Article 342, scheduled tribes. 342A, socially and economically backward classes. Now part 17, official language. Chapter 1, language of the Union. Article 343, official language of the Union. Article 344, Commission and Committee of Parliament on official language. Chapter 2, regional languages. Article 345, official language or languages of a state. Article 346, official language for communication between one state and another or between a state and the Union. 347, special provisions relating to language spoken by a section of the population of state. Chapter 3, language of the Supreme Court, High Courts, etc. Article 348, language to be used in the Supreme Court and in the High Courts and for acts, bills, etc. Article 349, special procedure for enactment of certain laws relating to language. Chapter 4, special directives. Article 350, language to be used in representation for redress of grievances. 350A, facilities for instruction in mother tongue at primary stage. 350B, special officer for linguistic minorities. 351, directive for development of Hindi language. Part 18, emergency provisions. Article 352, proclamation of emergency. 353, effect of proclamation of emergency. 354, application of provisions relating to distribution of revenues while proclamation of emergency is in operation. 355, duty of union to protect states against external aggression and internal disturbances. 356, provisions in case of failure of constitutional machinery in states. 357, exercise of legislative power under proclamation issued under Article 356. 358, suspension or provision of Article 19 during emergencies. 359, suspension of enforcement of rights confirmed by Part 3 during emergency. 359A is now omitted. It was related to application of this part to the state of Punjab. It is now omitted. Article 360, provisions as to financial emergency. Part 19, miscellaneous. Article 361, protection of President and Governor and Raj Pramukhs. Article 361A, protection of publication of proceedings of Parliament and state legislatures. 361B, disqualification for appointment of remunerative political post. 362, rights and privileges of rulers of Indian state, omitted. 363, bar to interfere by courts in disputes arising out of certain treaties, agreements, etc. 363A, recognition granted to rulers of Indian state to seize and privy purposes to be abolished. Once again, I am repeating it, this article 363A, recognition granted to rulers of the Indian states to seize and privy purposes to be abolished. Article 364, special provisions as to major parts and aerodromes. 365, effects of failure to comply with or to give effect to directions given by the Union. Article 366, definitions. Article 367, interpretation. Part 20, amendment of the Constitution. Article 368. Power of Parliament to amend the Constitution and procedure thereof. Part 21. Temporary, transitional, and special provisions. Article 369. Temporary power of Parliament to make laws with respect to certain matters in state list as if they were matters in the concurrent lists. Concurrent list. Article 370, temporary provision with respect to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Article 371, special provisions with respect to the state of Maharashtra and Gujarat. Article 371A, special provisions with respect to the state of Nagaland. Article 371B, special provision with respect of the state of Assam. 371C, special provisions with respect to the state of Manipur. 371D, special provisions with respect to the state of Andhra Pradesh and the state of Telangana. Article 371E, establishment of certain university, central university in Andhra Pradesh. 371F, special provisions with respect to the state of Sikkim. 371G, special provisions with respect of the state of Mizoram. 371H, special provisions with respect to the state of Arunachal Pradesh. 371I, special provision with respect to the state of Goa. Article 371J, special provision with respect to the state of Karnataka. Article 372, continuance in force of existing law and their adoption. Article 372A, power of the President to adopt laws. Article 373, power of President to make order in respect of persons under the preventive detention in certain cases. Once again, I am repeating this article. Article 373, power of President to make order in respect of a persons under prevention detention in certain cases. Article 374, provisions as to judges of the federal court and proceedings pending in the federal court or before His Majesty or in council, Majesty in council. Article 375, courts, authorities and officers to continue to function against courts, authorities and offenses to continue to function subject to provisions of the Constitution. Article 376, provisions as to judges of high courts. Article 377, provisions as to Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Article 378, provisions as to the Public Service Commission. 378A, special provisions as to duration of Andhra Pradesh Legislative Assembly. 379 to 389 and then 390 and 91 all are omitted. From which section? 379 to 391 all are omitted. Article 392, power of Parliament to remove difficulties. part 22. This is the last part of Constitution. Short title commencement authoritative text in Hindi and repeals. Article 393 short title, 394 commencement, 394A authoritative text in the Hindi language, 395 repeals. So friend, this is the part 4 of the Constitution of India. Now we'll see next part. Remaining part are already over. Articles are over, 395. Now in next part number 5, we'll see the schedules. Okay. Till then, thank you. Jai Hind.